Open your ears and lube up your butthole. It's time for the What Do We Call It podcast. Now, here's your host. It's Jmann. Welcome to the What Do We Call It podcast. I'm Jmann.
And I'm number one fan, Tim.
Previously, a few episodes ago, I mentioned Ditty.
Yes, you did.
And I said, to be continued.
Mm-hmm.
Well, buckle up.
Hold on to your butts.
A lot of what I'm going to read you comes from a story from City Pages a few years back. Okay, so just to note, Ditty started as a sanitation worker for the city of Minneapolis in 1986.
A long time ago.
A job he was awarded through a lottery-based system due to an abundance of applicants. He called in sick just 4 days over 3 decades and served as the president of the Laborers Union Local. In 2015, he was promoted to foreman.
A little bit of hard work and determination.
He was a dedicated city employee.
He was.
And I might add that over the years, citizens would call in and compliment his work ethic and his availability to the public with questions about sanitation-related issues, with recycle bins, what goes where, days of the week, shit of that nature. There was an entire apartment complex, association, that once had him come to a meeting so they could have it better explained to them, and he did so, and they complimented him to the city. This guy was well-liked.
He's well-liked, and he did his job well.
Okay, so I'm going to jump right into the shitstorm. On November 15th, 2015, 2 Minneapolis PD officers shot and killed Jmann Clark. Are you familiar with the story?
Yeah, it's whatever.
So he was wrestling with the cops, kind of. Black Lives Matter says they shot him while he was handcuffed behind his back on the ground. Clearly bullshit.
Yeah, it was bullshit.
Because he was found to have not been handcuffed, or even if he was, his DNA was on the stock of the cop's gun. He touched the cop's gun.
Yep.
Not trying to get into debate about that shit. So turmoil invaded the city. Protesters squatted outside the MPD 4th Precinct on Plymouth Avenue North. Molotov cocktails and rocks were hurled at officers. A dozen people appeared at the front door of Mayor Betsy Hodges' home, demanding she release video footage that might show whether Clark was handcuffed when he was shot. City Hall was a house divided. Some council members, like Cam Gordon and Lisa Bender, whoever the fuck they are, joined protesters. Blong Yang, hilarious name, and Council President Barb Johnson lobbied on behalf of neighborhood residents for an end to the demonstration. So in the wake of the demonstration, higher-ups were determined to not allow a long-term encampment like those occurring during the Occupy protests a few years earlier. City workers began hearing rumblings about dismantling the camp. The way garbage workers understood the whispers, the raid would occur in the early morning. Protesters would be given verbal warning to pack up and leave. Officers in riot gear would clear out the area as firefighters extinguished fires, and sanitation staff tossed everything else into a garbage truck. The whole operation would be over in 20 minutes. But garbage workers hadn't been trained to enter hostile situations. Here's a quote. "We'd done cleanup after the I-35 Mississippi River Bridge collapse in the Mercy Holmes neighborhood in 2007 and the Northside tornado in 2011. Ditty would write weeks later in an email to Care 11. But our guys have never had training dealing with working in riots where I felt they would get hurt. Safety wasn't the only worry. Al was concerned about people because they know the workers and they live in these neighborhoods, and he was afraid it'd be an all-out war if they had gone in there. So this was safety and them being neighbors. It was a real touchy situation at the time. A lot of anger, a lot of tempers up."
Legitimate concerns, if you ask me.
Right. Al's notes from that week show he mentioned workers' concerns to Herberholz, his immediate boss. According to his mother, Al didn't want any sanitation workers to participate in the cleanup. But he told me Dave was telling him they didn't have a choice. When he left work Friday afternoon, Al didn't know if a weekend raid was a go. He'd soon find out. According to city documents, the operation would involve 3 departments: fire, police, and public works. The cops were going to protect all the firefighters and everything like that, says a source inside city government with direct knowledge of the ops plan, whose identity wasn't leaked somehow. Go figure. They'd put out the fires that were burning and the public works people would come in. Everyone was reassured the cops were there to protect the firefighting people and the public works people. But those assurances didn't reach the sanitation department. And Ditty believed that he, along with laborers Jay Lutz and Mitch Swanson were being ordered into a danger zone armed with plastic bags. So you're going in, and there have been violent protests or near violent protests in the 4th Precinct.
They were violent.
And you know that you have to go in there, and the cops are trying to maintain order while the firefighters do their thing. Obviously, you're walking around with garbage bags. You're the last rung of importance of all the city workers as far as the cops are concerned in that scenario, I'm sure.
As far as the cops are concerned, yes. Yeah.
It shouldn't be that way.
No. But again, the cops were, honestly, at that point, I think they were just following orders. I think they were just told, follow the firefighters and keep an eye on them. I don't think the cops were told to watch the city sanitation workers. Otherwise, they would have.
So late at night on November 20th, Al surfed the internet. He watched a YouTube video showing 2 masked men brandishing handguns, supposedly headed for the encampment. The men would later be identified as white supremacists, heading to confront protesters. In Al's mind, the stage had been set for violence. Believing that he had nowhere else to turn, he decided to summon outside help. And at 9:59 p.m., he emailed KARE 11 TV. Subject of the email, Black Lives Matter tip. Included in the message was a copy of the police department's plan. This is going down Saturday and Sunday morning, he wrote. Al would later explain his motive, to the city, I believe they mean. I feared for the health and safety of subordinate employees who were being sent into an unsafe work environment without adequate protection. I felt if media cameras were present and filming, protesters would not be violent towards employees.
Well, they would. They would just cover their faces up like the cowards they are.
Yeah, it's Antifa. But this is pre-Antifa, so who knows?
That's how it got started. Though they fucking... whatever.
So by midnight, police officials inside the Emergency Training Operations Facility on 37th Avenue Northeast were reading his email because someone at KARE 11 had sent it to police spokesperson Scott Soroka, a former reporter at the station. It included the tipster's AOL address.
Nice.
KARE president at the time of this story, John Rimez, would only say that the station is still, quote, investigating what may have happened with the story. I think it's pretty obvious. Somebody said, hey, Scott, somebody's leaking your police department's info. Here's the motherfucker who did it. It was more of a cronyism thing than actually protecting the public because he had a legitimate safety concern. Now, it's up to him to subjectively decide how much danger there really is. Other people might from the outside look in and go, come on, quit being a pussy. The cops are there, the firefighters are there, you're fine. Just pick up the garbage.
Sorry, that's a situation even I wouldn't want to go into without adequate protection.
Now, let's say, because you've worked on the road before and on the highway, there's a situation where there's protests on the interstate, and the state patrol is going to come in and crack skulls. And it just so happens it's in your jurisdiction, and they tell your crew, we're going to go in, we're going to force them off the road, and while we're there, we're going to have your crew put up barricades to kind of section them off from getting back onto the interstate and blocking traffic. Would you want to play any part in that?
I would, as long as I knew there weren't going to be any danger. Like if a cop was going to be close at hand, say within 100 feet.
But there's all these people that are going to be running around screaming about their rights, that you don't care about justice, and fuck you, and Black Lives Matter this, and the cops are going to be busy with them. And then these people are going to be pushing back against the cops, and your crew is trying to put up the barricades, right? And there's cars trying to get through. It creates a perfect storm of danger.
No, it does. And that's a situation I honestly wouldn't want to get into.
So sometime during that night, Al received an email saying the raid was aborted. Message, reply, street cleanup strike team. Read the subject line. For many reasons, the email said, this has been canceled. 2 or more other raids were planned and also called off, say city council members. So this missed opportunity did not sit well with some city officials that were in the higher ranks. And they had the power to, quote, make certain a tipster was going to pay. Al's mother reads that he was a nervous wreck for weeks and over Christmas. He was always worrying within the back of his mind, but once it got to the new year, I think he felt all of it was kind of behind him and he could move on with his life. Unbeknownst to Al, forces inside city government were conspiring to uncloak him. What had started off as a few pissed-off cops had gained traction behind closed doors. Fast forward to January 22nd, 2016. Dorleen saw Al pull into the driveway. This is his mother, who he lived with, wondering what he was doing home in the early afternoon. And she says Al told her, I had to turn in my keys and my cell phone. They made me go home. I'm under investigation. I've been suspended from my job, and I have no clue why. They won't tell me.
Oh, I'm sure he knew why.
He knew why, but they won't give you the reason.
No, but I mean, your gut tells you why.
That doesn't stop the anxiety from eating your brain alive.
No, it doesn't. Because it could have been something else, too. I suppose. Something he didn't realize. But
I think more of what sent him into this upcoming depressive and anxiety-stricken down spiral was he didn't know his fate. To be told, you're in trouble, we're not going to tell you why, go home and sit there while we wait to tell you what we want to tell you. In the meantime, you know that the gears are turning, the machinations of government, and they're doing everything they can to, quote, investigate, which in reality I can tell you from experience is they know what result they want, and they're, quote, neutral fact finders
are looking to get the result they want.
They are looking for details to corroborate the hypothesis to support what they already want to do, the conclusions they've drawn. And this is why I can totally feel for what this guy went through. I've been through that shit. It's why I don't work for the government anymore. If you stand up and you speak out and you call them out of their bullshit, you are painting a target on your back, which is unfortunate because you would think that the squeaky wheel gets grease, not gets greased.
Yeah, even though I completely understand with Al's safety concerns and all that, because, I mean, I've done shit on roads and everything and trying to close roads, even without the threat of protest. Some people get really pissed off when they want to get on that freaking highway ramp and I just shut it down. Or they want to get through to this neighborhood and I just close off the roads. No, I'm not moving a barricades to get through. I fucking closed it. That gets intense, and that's not people that are part of a protest. However, I think he went about it wrong.
Go on.
I mean, it doesn't sound like it was going to be, okay, and tomorrow morning we're doing it. It sounds like he had a little bit more time to try to convince or get help or whatever. I mean, I feel bad for the guy. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he should have, well, once we get to the end of this, whatever happened, I don't think he was smart to contact Care 11.
Well, now, if you are a government employee and he was a foreman, so he's not even middle management.
No, he's like upper lower.
He's the highest rung of the lower tier of importance as far as subordination goes. And he reports it to his supervisor who's like, well, tough shit, deal with it. You still have your concerns. You don't feel they're being addressed. And he's unwilling to pass it to the higher-ups because they have their agenda. So basically, the sanitation department guys were numbers, not people. They needed to get a job done. That's fine. Jobs need to get done. But let's say that this was a women's rights protest. And some women voiced concerns that they didn't feel safe, that the usual fire bombers that show up at abortion clinics to damn all these baby murderers to hell were going to come in there and wreak havoc and they were going to be unsafe. If a woman in that situation said she felt unsafe, let's say, for instance, a reporter whose job it is to cover the news and go into hostile situations. There's dozens of reporters in the last decade that have died in conflict zones just trying to get the story out of the people that were forced to live through civil war, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, occupations, the Arab Spring, all that shit.
Yep.
But if a female reporter said, I don't feel safe going to this abortion clinic protest rally, I'm pretty sure they'd send a mail instead. Or they just would go by helicopter, or they'd find some other means other than being right there in the shit.
No, Al, since his immediate supervisor was like tough shit, he should have taken it higher up. Like, I talked to my supervisor, he's saying, fuck off. This is a legit concern. Can we please have something?
But what if you felt you couldn't even turn to the people that were supposed to want to know that shit, the people that are in power to enforce those rules and explore that concern? You had nowhere left to turn because everybody in the way up is just like, fuck you.
So nowhere else to turn. I have to do this or I lose my job, right? That's the situation. I'm in this corner.
Well, who do you turn to voice your concerns when the people that are supposed to be there to hear you will not give you a voice?
Well, in that situation, and I think we've had debates about this before, that's when I carry. And if I get fucked with, if I feel my life is threatened, I will defend myself. And I will deal with the court and all that bullshit later on.
Well, the point I was driving at is the media. That's why people go to the media. They feel like nobody else will listen, and that's what they're there for. Hypothetically speaking, they should be there to speak up for the little guy, to do the investigative reporting, to get the stories out that people want to hear so that everyone's more informed of what's going on. Unfortunately, these days, it's more about pre-written fucking scripts.
It's an agenda, yeah. It's
by media conglomerates and sweepsweek ratings bumps.
Yeah. Well, then you know what? I mean, just backing us up a little bit, maybe Al's problem here was he went to Care 11. Maybe if he knew that there was a Care 11 person that knew one of the cops, he should have gone to, like, ABC or CBS.
I can tell you from experience that leaving an anonymous tip on KSTP doesn't normally get you a phone call or email back. I've sent them tips about all kinds of shit. They want to speak to you. They want to have a face, obviously, for proofing it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you want to stay anonymous because you're afraid that your identity might leak because of ding, ding, ding shit like this.
Yeah.
Like you can't trust the fucking media to maintain your anonymity when they're supposed to protect their informants for safety's sake.
Well, for them, yeah. I don't think they really care that much, but
they should. Anyway, so for Al, the weeks dragged on, becoming months. Months he sat at home. The guy couldn't sleep. He would pace at night. He stopped eating. He stopped watching sports, which his family knew was a major big fucking red flag there. The guy just shut down. So now his union lawyer, which it's a mixed bag. My mom will tell you that union lawyers are spineless and they'll fucking bend over. I can tell you from experience, union lawyers don't have the most fight.
I think my union's full of shit.
Well, no knock against any union lawyer I've ever worked with because they put in their time and done their due diligence. But I did walk away feeling like, where the fuck was the fire and brimstone? Could you turn it up a notch or two? Come on.
Maybe
I could put on a
should've.
more convincing performance than you did.
When I lost that job, maybe I should have went and talked to the lawyer. I just talked to my, the shop steward, and he's like, well, there isn't much we can do. It's like, oh, okay, fuck you, all that money I paid you guys.
So here's the next section, which is communications between Al and his lawyer,
All right.
Laura Sparts. So she was angling to set up a meeting with various city officials. The meetings never happened, and according to email chains between Sparts and Al, despite her assurances that he might be rehired in a demoted role through arbitration, his struggles amplified. He's just going nuts at home. He says, I'm full of anger and depressed. They all want to know why I'm not at work. So this better get done this week. It's ridiculous. I feel like I'm in prison. 8 days later, he writes again, I'm losing my mind. Either get me back to work or they can fire me. Well, Al would soon get his answer. According to city rules, discipline, quote, will normally be administered progressively. Do you understand what that means?
Yep.
The more times you get in trouble, the worse it gets.
Yep.
No matter if it's the same thing, and the first offense that gets you a write-up is way worse than the next thing you get in trouble that should normally be a slap on the wrist. It's just, it's
Slap on the
bullshit.
wrist, and then there's directives, and then if that don't work, they give you a second set of directives, and if that doesn't work, then they talk about possible suspension. It's a long process to get fired from government jobs.
It can be. It can, especially if they don't like you.
Some of them are harder than others.
Some people get fast-tracked through the process.
Yeah, some do.
And paid to stay home.
We had
like
a guy
Al
that
Ditty and
that
other
happened
people
to.
I won't name.
Yeah. I'm picking up what you're laying down.
Okay.
But we had a guy, he was fast-tracked through the system too, but he totally deserved it.
So it says the range of discipline is from verbal warnings to termination. Minneapolis spokesman Casper Hill says the only prior instance of a city employee being cited for improper communication with the media happened in 2013. Sergeant Marvin Schumer was given a letter of reprimand. Al's case would not receive the same kind of treatment. Probably because it was a more high-profile instance with the subject matter. On March 4th, 2016, Al was last called to a meeting with the city. He was fired, and according to a termination letter signed by Cierney and Steve Kotke, then head of Public Works, Al's leak had, quote, jeopardized public safety and the safety of city employees, as well as caused adverse financial impact. It also claimed that he had never discussed his concerns with superiors and that his email violated the ethical aspirations of the city's employee code.
What the fuck does that mean?
Basically, the city is unable to respond to very specific information about this, right? And they'll cite classified private personnel data.
Yeah.
And
they got
also
so much bullshit they can hide behind.
And also, police spokeswoman Sergeant Catherine Michael declined comment citing confidentiality rules. So here's the thing. Here's the part of it that I didn't put on the screen. This story starts off talking about Al pacing between his bedroom and a bed in the basement and back and forth, and his mom being worried. And she asks him if he's okay, and he doesn't answer her. And she goes down to, get some laundry out of the dryer to bide some time before she asks him again. She found Al's feet sticking out of his closet. He hung himself.
That's sad.
And she called his brother, frantic, who rushed over to perform CPR, but it was too far gone. He was dead. So because the city needed a scapegoat, and they were so intent on nailing this guy to a cross, they sent him into a spiral, mentally, did not give a shit about the adverse effects on his mental health due to their fucking agendas, and this guy killed himself.
About the 29 years of dedicated service he gave that city.
And here's the thing. He knew if he got fired, he didn't have enough service time in to qualify for Rule of 90, which means that his pension would have been halved, $700 a month.
Well, they still have the Rule of 90?
They did at the time of this story.
Oh, damn. Ours Rule of 90 was gone a long time ago.
This story was from, I believe, May 2016. So how do you feel knowing that an agenda was used to take one man and make him a scapegoat, and they ground him down, and it affected him that way? That a government that people pay money to keep in power, and the hardworking sanitation engineers, the cops, the firefighters, it's not just happening to Al Ditty. He's just the most high-profile case. This shit happens all the time to all levels of government because it's all fucking politics, and if you rub people the wrong way, they will take you out.
Yep. You don't want to piss off the people at top because they'll fucking make things happen.
Let's say, for instance, you have a safety concern at work and you wait 3 days to report it because you're nervous about how the information is going to be received. And sure as shit, just like you thought it would, they use it against you and say that you're doing it as retaliation. How would that make you fucking feel?
Pretty fucking shitty and not very trusting.
Right. So I found this other story that was an update, and it was an interview with Teresa Nelson, the legal director for the ACLU of Minnesota, talking about the ongoing investigation of the Al Ditty whistleblower story. So this was a podcast or something, and Sam, the host, and Teresa Nelson discussed the legalities surrounding the subpoena that the MPD used to identify Al as the whistleblower, who set up an email account to anonymously leak police plans to Care 11. He started the email that he sent it from just to send that email to notify them of the dangers.
Mm-hmm.
MPD, thanks to Scott Soroka's contacts in Care 11, spoke to his superiors, and MPD came up with a subpoena to get the identity of the whistleblower. And here's why the ACLU gives a shit. Teresa confirms that previously held suspicion that issuing a subpoena in this way is not in accordance with the law, especially given the fact that Al was never under criminal investigation. Furthermore, she points out that using obstruction of legal process as the justification for that subpoena was not within the constitutional limits of that particular crime, and that the police should have and likely knew that fact.
Yeah, but they figured nobody would be looking.
Right. So here they are abusing their power. It's another Minneapolis agency abusing their power because of City Hall. So now, the lasting impression that this story has left on me as a former government worker who got out before it took me down that deep of a rabbit hole, I can tell you from experience, having somebody misappropriate your intentions to punish you for actions that they deem were purposeful when they were simple mistakes, not purposeful efforts to conceal anything or to get other people in trouble for retaliation, it feels pretty fucking shitty.
I can honestly say I've never been in that situation, and I pray I don't ever have to be in that situation.
I cannot believe that this kind of power run amok in this day and age still exists. And the problem is that they use the data privacy and the personnel decision secretive bullshit to keep as much of it buried as possible. Now, if there's a decision on your behavior, which there was not for Al's, mind you, his termination is left in permanent appeal because he died. It cannot be resolved. It will never become public record, which is something I think his crooked-ass lawyer worked with the city on to make it so they didn't have to admit all of their involvement, which is what this ACLU lady is talking about. If it's not public information, they don't have to reveal all the steps or the findings.
Yeah, I suppose.
So it may look like a sweetheart deal to his mom to get this modest survivor's payout after his suicide, but she lost her son, and more importantly, the truth gets buried.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sickening. And I think our government officials need to be held to an even higher standard where I'm not surprised in some of these countries when you get these lying-ass crooked politicians that they get fucking assassinated right outside their own homes. I'm not calling for violence against these people. That's not what I'm insinuating. But it does not surprise me, and they wonder why it happens. It's because you get in that position of power, and they talk about learning to cover your ass. Real leadership makes everyone better. It's not about you're the best.
Mm-hmm.
And I, for the last 11 years, did not work under leadership. I didn't have a leader. I had a boss. He's a puke. He's a stupid, military-minded, never really served any real fucking time on the front lines, beak-faced cunt. Shit on him. And I threw the Al Ditty example in his face once, and he's like, I don't understand. What do you mean?
Didn't expect you to.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you know what, Iron Range, I didn't expect your thick fucking Forrest Gump haircut having ass to really see what I was getting at anyway. I'm sorry I didn't have the time to literally draw you a fucking map. So in memory of Al Ditty, I offer unto you my undying adulation for his commitment to the safety of his crew and dedication to his other workers, because I have done the same type of shit and I have paid for it. Interact with the show on Twitter at What Do We Call It? That is at What Do We Call It? You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/group/What Do We Call It podcast show. For the What Do We Call It podcast, I'm Jmann.
And I'm number one fan Tim.
And that's the end.